level, adopting an age-sensitive lens to policymaking, which we are jointly organizing as regional commissions as a side event to the 61st session of the Commission on Social Development. Allow me to please share a few house rules before we start. Kindly note that interpretation is not available during this event. Guests who wish to participate in the discussion are invited to send a message using the chat option available at the bottom of your screens. Unfortunately, for this event, you will not be able to open your mics or cameras. Please note that this session is being recorded, and I hope that's okay with everyone. I now hand over to my dear colleague, Dr. Srinivas Tata, the Director of Social Development Division from ESCAP, who will be moderating this event. Over to you, Dr. Srinivas.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for your kind introduction and also providing and setting the stage for this very, what I hope, and we all hope will be a very interesting side event on adopting an age-sensitive lens to policymaking, which is being, as you know, this side event is being held at the margins of the Commission on Social Development, which conducted the global review earlier last week, which culminated in the high-level panel where the chairs of all the regional reviews presented the regional outcomes at the global level, and this was greatly appreciated by all the member states. So we are very grateful to the member states and to UNDESA and also all our member states and all our stakeholders for giving us the support for conducting these really, what would I say, extremely fruitful and focused regional reviews. Now, in this side event, we are trying to explore maybe what were the key issues that emerged in each one of these regional reviews. I've got a panel of really four experts drawn from the four regions. ECA is not represented due to some technical issues, but we have experts which are representing all the other regions. We have Professor Shireen Hussain, who's the Professor of Health and Social Care Policy from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, who will be presenting the Western Asia, the ESQA perspective. We have Dr. Marianne Sao, the chairperson of the Sao Foundation of Singapore, who will be presenting the Asia Pacific perspective. And Dr. Veronica Montes de Oca, who is a senior researcher at the Social Research Institute at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, who will be presenting the Latin America and Caribbean perspective. And last but not least, Mr. Alfredo Ferrante, the chair of the Standing Working Group of Aging of the UNECE, who will be presenting the viewpoint and the findings from Europe. So, and this will be followed. I'm proposing to follow a more conversational style, asking maybe questions to each one of our panelists with a little follow-up discussion later on, which will be followed later on by a presentation from the Regional Commission, a short presentation on the tools and other support services that they're offering to member states for implementation of MIPA. And that's going to be maybe a short one following the panel presentation, and after which we'll open the floor for discussion. So without much ado, it is now my pleasure to go to our first panelist with my first set of questions. My first question is addressed to Professor Shireen Hussain, who's the Professor of Health and Social Care Policy in the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Dr. Hussain, what are the key findings? What are the challenges and achievements that you have seen in the ESQA region in the implementation of MIPA over the past few decades? What are the peculiar challenges that are faced by this region? And maybe if you can present us in about 7 minutes, what you think should be the priorities looking ahead. Over to you, Professor Hussain.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tata. I'm going to share a few slides and speak to them to provide just the experience of the region. So I'm sharing my slides now, and I'm going to put it as, I hope you can see this. So thank you very much for inviting me to come. The first thing I want to highlight is the specific experience of the West Asia region, which constitutes of many Arab countries. And key of those is the pace of aging change. So aging affects all the structures of the whole population. This is why it has to be mainstream, because it affects the society as a whole. But uniquely to the region, the countries in the region are going through this process incredibly faster than previously experienced in countries which have now completed their transition. And at the same time, there are good news, opportunities, and challenges. So one of the main opportunities that, unlike the current situation in Europe and in other OECD countries, the region still have the population dividends or the youth bulks, or a large number of people who are still in the employment age group. Additionally, the cultures and norms in the region actually pave the way for treasuring, respecting, and kind of looking after older people. However, it's kind of a double-edged sword where not many opportunities or the infrastructure is built around older people because of the historical younger population, and many of the policies are not oriented. And also what I want to highlight is the heterogeneous experience, both vertically and horizontally in the region. So some countries have started their transition, others are going through, or in the next decade will go through the transitions. And some of those particular countries, especially in the Gulf region, will go through this transition extremely fast. So the graph on the right-hand side represent the time it takes from moving from pre-transition to post-transition. And some of these lines, like for Saudi Arabia, it's almost like a vertical line. They are going to have only 10 years window to move through this, this change. One of the key challenges that we face is related to the differentials between longevity, that life expectancy, that we all live longer, and healthy longevity. So unfortunately, longevity is increasing faster than healthy longevity. And this is not only in the region, this is happening across the world. However, the region where it's not situated where we know how to provide long-term care services and there is a strong market for provision, the region doesn't have this infrastructure. So one of the issues that we think about is how we're going to care for older people. First, how we're going to provide opportunities and engagement and infrastructure for older people, but also those who need care. So internationally, the movement is toward personalization, aging in place, and relying on a strong market. When we look at the situation in the region, where you have the orange squares, we have a very strong reliance on the family, the invisible welfare state. However, at the same time, this family is unsustainable because we know that there is so many socioeconomic and demographic changes happening. But not only this, sometimes people are not aware of the best ways to look after people or to provide them with care. There is huge emotional care burden, which almost always rely on women in the society. And hence, we think about the suitability and sustainability of this situation. But at the same time, the opportunity that if we think about formal regulated markets, that will create huge opportunities for jobs, and particularly to mobilize women employment and to provide new careers and ideas for employment. Now, the countries in the region have been actually working hard in their policies to realize some of these challenges. And I'm going to offer two examples, one from Egypt, one from Saudi Arabia. So Egypt is one of the most populous countries. It's very large, it's over 100 million population. It hasn't started its transition yet. It's going to start in the next 15 years, and it's going to take quite a long period of time to complete the transition. However, the size and volume of the cohorts in itself provides a huge challenge. And the difference in terms of the high unemployment rate, which kind of have very low demographic system representation when compared to the demographic representation. However, Egypt is trying to do a number of things. One of them is to launch their universal health insurance, which has been launched in 2018. Social protection, they are trying to work hard to develop schemes, and they have the Takaful, or solidarity, and Karama, dignity, which targets directly older people from vulnerable groups who have very low income. And one of the exciting new development is the Older People's Rights Law, which is currently, or last year, has been debated. It hasn't been formally became a legislative law yet. And one of the interesting development as well linked to the long-term care market. Some of the study shows that there is booming market for long-term care because of the demand, but it's unregulated market. So one of the efforts of the government they're doing is to create a kind of a program to train care workers, and it's piloted in 2019, and they are currently trying to expand this, across with a bigger intake and bigger kind of application. Now, the next country is Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia is a smaller country, richer country, so it's a high-income country. And it's also one of the countries that will go through the demographic pace and demographic change very, very fast. They're going to start in 2032, and they're going to take only 12 years to complete. Already the long-term care market is on the agenda within the Saudi government, and is estimated actually to be one of the major growth sectors. There have been strong work around the healthcare transformation, and a big element in that is to try to move unnecessary care from hospitals to home care. And then the government is funding quite a lot of services, but now it's the thinking around the sustainability of this model and how we can work with the private sector and regulate and create a proper market. So the question becomes straight away, how we're going to fund this. So we've done an exercise with the support of course, UNESCO and their, kind of flagship report that came out last year. And then we put this model, which based on macro level indicators. There is not much data to do a more granulated estimation, but this model actually relies on high level estimates of the unemployment rate among women as a proxy for the availability of informal care, the level of population aging or age dependency rate at this point of time, and the GDP. What we can see here, that actually the estimated cost for some of these countries is quite minute when it compares to what's happening in OECD country. One of the big reasons for this is the young population. However, it assumes that there is a high level of employment in the countries. So really there is an opportunity to create job opportunities, but at the same time to maintain thinking about putting resources into this idea. Just to conclude, is the mainstreaming, when we think about mainstreaming aging approach, we have to think about an ecosystem that empowers older people, provides them with opportunity, but create a trustable formal mechanism for long-term care. We need to think about integrated care, about our lifelong learning process, and we need to pilot initiatives and evaluate them. And one big question is how to fund and finance this. And we can start from a small seed to grow. So I'm going to thank you here, and I hope that I didn't exceed my time. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Thank you, Professor Hussain. You did not exceed your time. And thank you so much for giving us very succinctly an overview of what's happening in the Western Asian region, along with a few examples of what is being done by certain countries in terms of health and social protection, but also focusing a little bit on issues such as LTC and mainstreaming of aging. So I will come back to you maybe to pick up on some of the specific aspects. Before we move on to our next panelist, I would like to just make a correction to my previous announcement. It was my oversight. Actually, the European region is being represented by Mr. Martin Amberger, who's the vice chair of the Standing Working Group on Aging of UNECE, and who's the head of the aging division in the government of Germany. Welcome, Mr. Amberger, and we'll be coming to you after our next panelist. So our next panelist to whom my question is directed is Dr. Marianne Tsao, who's the chairperson of the Tsao Foundation in Singapore. Dr. Tsao, from a stakeholder perspective, what did you see were the key takeaways from the Asia Pacific Review, where the stakeholders and governments really played a very big role, and I could see quite an interesting interaction throughout our roundtables. So just for your take on what were the key takeaways and what are the areas of priorities you think the Asia Pacific region should focus on? It's a big region, but I'm coming to you maybe for a few issues that you can hone in on in the 7 minutes given to you. Over to you, Dr. Tsao.
Thank you, Srinivas. Firstly, I think Dr. Hossain covered almost most of the key issues that the Asia Pacific is also facing. Asia Pacific, of course, as I mentioned, is a big region with lots of people, big countries with mega population like India, China, Indonesia, and even those who are not aging quickly, the just sheer numbers is very big, and some of the countries are aging very rapidly, maybe not 10 years, but around the 20 years mark, and then most of the country, many countries are still in a less developed area. I think we've been observing this amoeba process for the last 20 years because I actually participated in the first one in 2002. And of course, things have gotten a lot better, even though there's still much to do. I think in last June, I think all the stakeholders, member states, and the stakeholders came together and discussed and identify several areas. Many of them actually are pretty much brought up by Dr. Hossain as well. Firstly, long-term care remains an issue about care of people, older people who need care. And of course, families are in transition. Previously, I think a lot of countries in Asia Pacific, as in others, the family caregiving is a core, but of course, with changing the family, the migration, people working overseas and all that, women at work, smaller families, family caregiving is no longer can be relied on as the primary source of caregiving. So long-term care is an issue. And of course, intergenerational solidarity is also identified as a major issue of concern in this area. Of course, the whole digital transformation is also issue, but this is very much highlighted during the COVID, how important it is that we can help our older people cross the digital divide, and that remains an issue as well. Social protection, as I mentioned, many of the countries are still less developed, so creating the social protection floor continues to be a major challenge. And of course, lastly, we don't have much data. We need to have more research, more data, so that policymakers and the stakeholders can plan better. I think from a civil society perspective, and that's where I'm coming from, a civil society actor, I think generally speaking, there could be more interaction. I think the last round of meeting with MIPA, I would say that the working relationship with UN SKBS was excellent. Normally, nonprofits don't have very much voice. Not very developed in our own countries and could be better developed, and also collectively has very little voice at the multilateral level. I think their experience with UNESCO has been excellent, whereby a civil society has a greater voice and be able to move towards having more of a dialogue with the member states. And this is one thing that I want to emphasize that's really important, that we can do that, because I think civil society has a very clear view of what's going on in the community. Maybe we're not communicating that very well with the policymakers, and can do better, but generally speaking, policymakers, because they are kind of planning top down, oftentimes you not have a very clear view of actually what's going on. I think that dialogue be very useful. And secondly, in terms of policy action translation, again, civil society working on the ground can actually see where things can work and things may not work. Sometimes I think we all have our own stereotypic prejudices, and I think our policymakers may also have the same issue. So generally speaking, the stereotypic view of older people being only dependent and have no strength and really kind of a burden, not so much to invest in, but just sort of try to deal with a care issue, really missing the point, because obviously there's much more to be done to move upstream and not only think about older people as consuming care, but to think about how to prevent people needing care, and also looking at opportunities might be presented, such as the marketplace and so on and so forth. So I think from the civil society perspective, I think greater encouragement or support at the national level to develop further, and of course at the multilateral level at the region to do more with the member states, such as through the UN. I think I have the good fortune to be the convener of a regional civil society network of agencies working with older people, and we already have the benefit of learning from each other what we've done well and not do well, from each other's practices and advocacy efforts with our government. And I think collectively we look forward to be able to work with member states perhaps through the UN on that, from their perspective. I would just end there. I think there are quite a lot of examples of where there'll be good practices in the region protecting rights of older people in terms of multilateral collaboration and so on and so forth, but we can talk about that more later, perhaps. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saab. I think you really honed in on the issue of meaningful participation of older persons associations and civil society in decision-making, both at the national level, regional level, and the global level. I believe we are taking some good steps in that direction. They are good examples, but clearly this is going to be an issue. And you also highlighted one critical issue that has been an ongoing discussion at the global level, the whole issue of intergenerational solidarity. that the future is going to be one where there'll be significant number of older persons coexisting with large cohorts of younger people. Without I think there is absolutely no go but to have real meaningful intergenerational dialogue and learning. And we'll come back to that. And thank you so much for highlighting that. The next panelist, before I move to Mr. Amberger, is Ms. Veronica Montes de Oca, who will be representing the ECLAC region. So my question to you, Madam Dr. Veronica, is based on your experience within the Latin American region. And we know that Latin America has made some tremendous progress in the area of protecting rights of older persons, where in terms of agreements and instruments, but what are the bigger priorities that your region faces? Over to you, Dr. Veronica.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tata. I would like to show you some slides just to share some ideas of this document, Aging in Latin America and the Caribbean. And obviously, how do you know, Latin America is going to a rapidly population aging. And maybe in this moment, we are transit to the young adult society to the adult society. And the next years, we have more or less the aging society. In just 30 years, the process is very, very quickly for the demographic and epidemiological repercussions, especially in the medium and long-term planning to public policy. And another thing is very important is the heterogeneity. Like Asia and Arabia, for example, we have a lot of heterogeneous situations like in Latin America, and that is not a disadvantage. Maybe it's an advantage for the next year. But we have a lot of challenges with, especially with some countries like Haiti or Bolivia. No, we understand the aging is a similar or parallel process to the development. And that is very, very important for us because we need to prepare to the next older persons and to work with older persons today. And what is the challenge more, the key priorities topics in the region? Well, we understand that from the MIPA, the human rights perspective is very, very important in the last decades. And unfortunately, we have a very consensus to this approach. And now we can promote not only in the discourse, is in the public policy. And a lot of countries like Argentina, Uruguay, Bolivia, Salvador, Mexico, we find the ratification of the convention, the Inter-American Convention for the Protection of the Older Persons, the human rights of older persons. And that is very, very important because with these 10 countries, now we can activate the mechanisms to follow up. And that is very, very important in Latin America. Now, but now we can challenge to influence these conventions in the local and national legislations. And we are working around because we have a lot of emerging themes like palliative care, long-term care institutions, preventions to the violence, and technological inclusions, a lot of things. But maybe the most important thing about in Latin America is the poverty. And in this sense, social protection systems is a lot of important because the poverty is very, very constant in the region, the inequality. And now with the pandemic and the last decades, the last years, we have more coverage to the non-contributory pensions. And that is very important for the women, for the indigenous people. And now we need to work together with the economy issues. And another very important thing is the discrimination is another challenge, the ageism with the gender, because it's both kind of discrimination for the people. And now we need to work together with the feminist movement, with the feminists and the gender public policy, because we need to work in this social protection system. But another very important thing, and unfortunately with the pandemic, we look the suffering, the system, the people in the health systems, and we need to improve life conditions. We need to improve the health system, and we need to reinforce the training for more and more health professionals to geriatrics and gerontologic perspective. And we now to include the intersectionality and intercultural point of view on this system, because we have 85 million of people with disability, with one kind of disability, and we need a lot of deals with the indigenous and the Afro-descendants people. But now in the we find a lot of a challenge with the non-binary gender population, and that is very important. Another very issue is the environment. Almost the majority of the older persons live in urban areas, but we can't forget the people in rural areas, because we have a lot of disparities, and we need to work in transport, housing policies, and other services like water, sanitation, energy, and now internet are basic service. And another point, very, very important, but is in this environment, is the justice system, because we have a lot of forms to discriminations, abuse, or violence to the older persons. And for that, it's very important to create and reinforce the public participation, the older person's participation in the public policy. But now, like the world, we understand the care is a central theme for the development. But right. We have to work with gender demands, with a lot of women to demand provide care system, and we work in this sense, especially in some countries in Latin America, Costa Rica, Argentina, Uruguay, Chile now is very important, the program to try to installate in this country. We have a lot of good practice for that. Human rights perspective is essential, because is the form to fit together in this consensus in different countries, the social civil organization. But we need to emphasize the intersectionality in the intercultural perspective, because we have a lot of indigenous populations in the region. Obviously, the climate change and another kind of social environment disaster are very important in the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I think you've covered a lot of ground in the short time, but what strikes you is a commonality across the regions. But I do think that in Latin America, you have the advantage of having the Inter-American Instrument on Human Rights, which actually then we can come during the second round of discussions. Now, last but not least, now we move to Mr. Martin Amberger, who's the Vice Chair of the Standing Working Group on Aging in UNECE. Both from your national and regional perspective, Europe has gone through this in a way, Mr. Amberger. You've kind of gone through this aging process. How can the rest of the regions learn from Europe? What are the things that Europe has done well, and what do you think has not gone so well? What can we learn both from the positives as well as the negatives? Over to you, Mr. Amberger.
Thank you. First of all, our region is a special region. It's one of the oldest regions in the world, and I just want to give some figures to you, some statistical figures to better understand our region. Between 2002 and 2020, the number of people who are 65 years old and above has risen by 70.3 million. And the proportion increased from 13.4% in 2002 to 70.5% in 2020. Rising life expectancy, enduring low fertility, as well as migration have affected the extent and pace of population aging. The ongoing trends of these factors indicate that by 2030, people aged 65 years and older are set to account for 1/5 of the total population of the ECE region. This will further increase by 2050 to almost a quarter of the region's population. Persons aged 18 and above will make up 5.4% in 2030. The median age of the ECE population is set to rise from 39.5 years in 2020 to 41.8 years by 2030 and 43.9 by 2050. An important factor influencing the age structure and population growth rate of ECE countries has been migration. As a combined effect of declining fertility and significant outmigration, especially in the working age, 18 out of 52 ECE countries saw their populations decline in the 20 years between 2002 and 2022. But as in many other regions, also in our region, the COVID-19 pandemic has had far-ranging implications for the economy and for society. However, it is first and foremost a health emergency, which has affected millions across the ECE region, with particularly grave implications for older age groups. The pandemic has put older people at greater risk of physical and social isolation, loneliness, discrimination, and various human rights abuses, necessitating innovative responses beyond the economic and health domains. In that wide range, we're facing lots of challenges. The topic of population aging is, first of all, competing with other important societal challenges, for example, with the topic of migration, with the topic of inequality, and multiple emergencies. Mm-hmm. The magnitude of population aging and its socioeconomic implications are often not sufficiently acknowledged. Contributions of older individuals to society and economy are not sufficiently appreciated, including by the private sector, and there's still a negative image of aging in society. But of course, we are, and I think like the other regions as well, we're working on that, and I think we've already made some progress in that. Often, the topic of aging is confined to ministries or areas of social affairs or related ones, and not seen as a cross-cutting topic in the government, and also not in the different regions. This is also a problem how the countries are structured, from national government to local governments, and maybe some levels in between. And sometimes the topic of aging is mainly a topic of the local level, so it's hard for the national level to govern to the local level. The aging mainstream may be perceived by civil servants and policymakers as additional administrative burden. So we're also facing this problem. And the topic of aging is sometimes not seen as a very sexy topic by governments and in society. So this makes it hard because there needs to be long-term decisions, and these long-term decisions might not be good decisions for elections to win an election, because they might affect the population at first. So it might be likely for governments to lose elections by taking sometimes hard decisions who might be the right decisions for the long-term run. So this is also something we can learn from our region. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being so practical and open. If a region like Europe, which has been facing this issue still, as someone who's working in this field, you have some challenges. Then all of our other regions have something to learn. We all face challenges, maybe to a greater extent, but I think your frank sharing of this really was very, very helpful. So thank you so much. I'd like to come back for a second round of questions. I note that we have about 10 minutes for our second round, but maybe to squeeze in quick questions, maybe a couple of things. I wanted to ask all the 4 panelists for very short responses. What is the perspective from your region? Because there are varying levels of support for a new human rights instrument. Is MIPA still effective? Do we still? I mean, these are discussions that took place in the intervention that took place at the Commission on Social Development. Very quickly, maybe I'll start in the reverse order. So Martin, if I can start with you, just for a quick response from your side. Do you think, from your side, does your region, how does it perceive a new human rights instrument or a renewal of MIPA? Do you think MIPA is still valid? Just a quick response from you, please.
Well, I think to give a quick reply, I think the last week and the MIPA review has shown that MIPA is still alive. It's 20 years old, yes, and of course it's a long time, and of course it's time to discuss about an update. But it is still alive, and we need to implement MIPA. We need to further implement MIPA. One of the decisions taken in the ministerial declaration in Rome of the ECE ministers in June last year was to create the regional implementation strategy that we have to implement MIPA in our region. Regarding the human rights instrument, I think this is discussed in the open-ended working group on aging, and there's some progress made. And as you know, there's an informal group of member states and also civil society involved. So I think there will be some progress made, and the open-ended working group on aging has a mandate, and this needs to be fulfilled in whatever way this might happen. So we're waiting for the open-ended working group on aging taking place in April this year.
Thank you. Thank you for reiterating that MIPA still remains valid even in Europe, and also the fact that, yeah, there is hope for this human rights instrument, which is under discussion. Veronica, Dr. Veronica, very quickly, very short response. I think your region, there is kind of a groundswell towards a new instrument, but what is it? Or what is it? What is your perception on this? Very quickly.
Yes. I think that convention and the MIPA, and we have a lot of instruments in La Carta de San Jose, a lot of things, but we need to know to translate this convention, this approach, the human rights protection to the public policy, because we need to training, we need to transit the assistantialism to the human rights public policy. And we need to demand, obviously, a lot of research, a lot of perspective together with the data, because we need to think in the intersectionality, we need to think in the inequality perspective and the gender perspective, with interdisciplinary, intercultural, and intergenerational perspective too. We need to, it's very complex, but we need to transit, and that is, if it's not enough to the convention and the ratification, we need to be real for the older person.
Right. I think your stress on implementation and applying the human rights lens in our implementation, no matter what the instrument is I think important. Dr. Sao, very quickly from your perspective.
I think from a human rights perspective, I would have liked to see more discussion across Asia Pacific around this topic. I think it's a varied response. Like in some countries, like the Philippines, they actually instituted in 2016 an anti-age discrimination law. In Australia, of course, the National Commission on Human Rights actually have a dedicated commission around discrimination of older people and the rights of older people. But I think in other countries probably have different measures working around it, but it's not as much as what I'd like to see. However, on the MIPA front, I do feel that there's more energy coming through. I think 20 years ago, aging was still so new to people because most countries have not reached anywhere near seeing aging being visible. I think in 20 years hence, I think most countries are seeing from Asia Pacific the impact of older people on the families and perhaps even beyond that. So I think from a MIPA point of view, I do think it's actually a good time to try to step up and accelerate implementation and see. I'd like to see, of course, more collaboration, not just between member states, but with member states and civil society in that regard.
Thank you. Dr. Hussain.
Yeah, thank you.
Your
I'm just going to echo Dr. Tsao that there is an energy, and the 20 years mark is a good point. I think there is an energy in the region to look at strategies, but I think the region is still at a very, very early stage of these discussions. So we are still to put together a common aging strategy. There are some countries there are efforts around human rights specific to older people. Issues of ageism and the intersectionality between age and gender are not really fully discussed. Issues of isolation and loneliness are not discussed. But I think there is momentum. There is definitely an appetite to bring these issues and really to bring the discussion within an implementation lens rather than just strategy. We need to think about how to implement due to the very fast pace of aging that these countries are going through. And there is a lot to learn, and I think there is a lot to learn across particularly the LAC region and West Asia. I know the Asia Pacific also, there are some parts of it, like Australia maybe away, but I mean, there are lots of countries within the Asian Pacific as well. And there is a need for coordinated efforts, so that will give it more strength. But there is certainly a strong appetite, and MIPA, as kind of Martin said, is not dead even in Europe. So we need to capitalize on this, mark of 20 years.
Thank you. We got 3 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you for 1 minute more of responses. Very quickly, I'll maybe start off on the reverse. Dr. Hussain, if I can come to you, 1 minute. If you wanted to choose, ask the UN system to focus on one issue of critical support, what would that be?
That's a very
I know there are many
big...
areas, but I'm asking you for most important.
I really one is the most important change in perspective of what aging means. We tend in the region to think about aging as a dependency, as needs, which is true to some extent, but we have to create opportunity to engage. We have to think about new ways to participation for older people, and we need to mainstream them within other kind of thinking around welfare, around also employment and education. So the lifelong learning. So really think on the positive things that we having a lot of capital coming from older people, but creating opportunities. I would emphasize that.
Yes, thank you. I think and this was something that really resonates with discussion at the CSOC. Very well noted. Dr. Tsao, I know there are many issues, but if you're the most critical issues where you think the UN system at the regional level should focus on in Asia Pacific.
I actually think that we need to understand that the future is for us to make. People tend to think of older people and aging issues as being fixed, like all older people will be burdened, older people will be frail. And yet the future can be changed because we can attain good health and less disability by how we live our life today. As we all know, all the chronic diseases that cause disability, like diabetes, hypertension, all preventable to a large extent. And so in that level, I think policymakers need to understand that the future is how we create it today. And in that regard, I just want to make another point, which is that I think there's a lot to learn between countries, member states. I think the Honorable Minister from Maldives had mentioned that even as member states need to talk to each other because there's much to learn across the nation states. And I would like to add that perhaps if there's more dialogue with the civil society actors, will even be better.
Yes, very much. Thank you so much. I think at all levels, this interaction. Yes, Dr. Veronica, one issue that you want
my issue more important, Dr. Tata and colleagues, is education. Education is very important because the future, we need to prepare to the younger, the adult, and the next older persons and the policymakers. We need to show the virtuosism of the data, for example, but the theoretical approach to go with the public policy is very important. We need to make the justice perspective. We need to translate the human right to the justice in the life, in the lives for all persons. Never behind, never leave behind.
Yeah, not leaving them behind, just as human rights. Yes. Mr. Hamburger, just from your perspective, what is the priority focus? I know you listed many, but if you had one that you had to pick. I think you're muted, Mr. Hamburger.
Sorry, yeah, I muted myself. I think that the one focus should be to put the topic of aging as one priority list in all discussions, at UN level, seeing about human rights, be it about all the groups, the high-level political forums taking place. So the topic of aging and aging society needs to be put on the list of discussion, and we need an exchange of different member states how to create and deal with demographic change. So we really can learn from each other, and I think we should have more exchange between the member states about the topic of aging.
Thank you very much. We've come to the end of the first phase of the panel discussion, but I would request the panelists not to go away, please. Just we have a 15-minute presentation on the key tools that the UN system has to present. We're collecting questions in the meantime. We will come back to you with the audience questions. So please, if you can just be with us for some time until we finish with the UN presentation, which is also critical because it tells you what the UN system, or at least what the UN regional commissions are doing to support member states. You'd like to start with maybe, Sarah, you're going to set the stage before we move on to other regional commission colleagues. So Sarah, over to you to start with the overarching presentation of what the regional commissions have to offer. Then our colleagues from the regional commission, who include Pamela Villalobos, Lisa Watt, and of course, my deputy Sabine Henning, to speak about the subjects. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Srinivas. Just allow me 1 second to share my screen, please.
We can see your screen, just put it on a presentation mode, I
That's
think.
what I'm trying to do. For some reason, it's not allowing me. Apologies, just give me 1 second. Seems my screen is frozen. Sorry about that. 1 second, please.
Yeah, technology always challenges us at the vital moment.
Absolutely, when you
Yes,
least
yes,
expect it.
yes, will.
Okay. I'm just restarting the PowerPoint. For some reason, it froze. Sorry about that. It's not working. Milad, can you help?
Can anybody else do it? Then Sarah can speak to it.
That's what I'm trying to see. I'm trying
Is
to
it
see if
possible
Milad
for you
can
to do
share
it from your computer, or can we move on to the questions from the floor? Otherwise, somebody else can do it. Pamela, do you have the presentation? Maybe you can share it.
Srinivas, I have the latest version. That's why. Sorry.
Okay.
So,
Then we wait.
apologies about that.
Don't worry.
Oh, well, Milad will be sharing from his screen.
That's good. No
Give
problem.
him a second, please. Thank you for that.
Okay, we are good.
Okay, so very quickly, what the regional commissions do on the portfolio of aging, but as well as other portfolios. Next slide, Milad. We basically do a few classical roles. The first role is that we do capitalize on our convening power to bring together member states around aging issues. Most notably, recently we completed the MIPA regional review, in our different regions, where we brought together not only member states, but different stakeholders to do the 4th regional review of MIPA, and we will come to that. Each of us will speak about what has been done in our respective regions, but I'm talking here generally. Second, we try to build region-specific knowledge and to provide the evidence base for policy making through different knowledge products that we produce. Third, we try to foster collaboration and partnerships between governmental and non-governmental stakeholders to advocate for issues of older persons. And three, we also provide technical advice to member states to develop their aging policies and other aging-related, to address other aging-related priorities. And finally, we support the overall UN age-related agendas, including the 2030 Agenda, the ICPD, the UN Decade of Healthy Aging, just to name a few. Next slide, please. So I will go more specifically about what ESCWA is doing, and of course, my colleagues from the commissions will speak respectively about their own work. From ESCWA, and very briefly, what we've done over the past few years under our mandate to convene and bring together member states as well as different stakeholders, we have established an informal network of focal points on aging from our member states. We meet with them annually, and we, depending on the theme of the year, we try to bring attention to the issues of older persons and aging in our region, and to try to push it on the policy priorities of member states. Also, we do an annual meeting with parliamentarians, and here, you know, this is a result of our observation, basically, that they do play an important role when it comes to aging, addressing aging issues, as a lot of the time they are the final, perhaps, penholder of aging-related policies in the adoption of laws and strategies and whatnot. And as I mentioned just briefly a while ago, we do the MIPA regional review every 5 years. And this is part of our mandate. In our region, we completed the regional review in June. It was over the span of a year and a half, where we brought together all the stakeholders that are relevant in our region to discuss basically the status of implementation of MIPA in our region. What are the common challenges, emerging issues, opportunities, perhaps, and really encourage this regional dialogue to bring more and more attention to aging issues in our region. Next slide, please. In terms of providing technical support to our member states, we have actively engaged with them over the past couple of years to do several things. One, we are working actively on helping member states in our region to develop their aging strategies and policies. And given that in our region, it's a more nascent issue, given our young population, a lot of the member states a few years ago did not really have aging-specific policies, strategies, etc. And what we have worked on over the past few years is to try to put such policies in place, and or also older persons' laws, to have a national legally binding mechanism that would protect older persons, not just, you know, beyond the a strategy that would aim at developing programs and whatnot. We also work on building the capacities of member states to mainstream aging across the different policy areas, as Dr. Shireen had mentioned, and the importance of that really in areas of labor, education, health, social protection, so on and so forth. And to that extent, we have organized multiple capacity building workshops in our member states based on their request. Next slide, please. In terms of producing knowledge, we don't have time to showcase a lot of our work, but two products that I would like to bring to your attention. One is a policy toolkit which is on mainstreaming aging into policy making. It's an online interactive toolkit currently available in Arabic, but we are working on translating it. And the idea is that any policymaker or person who's interested, governmental or non-governmental, can go onto this online toolkit and explore how really can the issues of aging be mainstreamed across the policy sectors. And this is the toolkit is what we use as a basis for our capacity building that we do in the member states. The second are more in-depth research, and I give example of our population and development report series. The last two issues, one came in 2022 and the other in 2020, both focused on older persons as actually a priority for population issues in our region. The last report was about building forward better for older persons, reflecting on what was learned from the pandemic experience, to see how we can work better towards protecting and empowering older persons. And we specifically looked at in the care economy and the issues of data, the issues of social protection, and the reforms that are needed there. Next slide. I think I am done. For the sake of time, Srinivas, I hand over to my colleagues. Over to you.
Over to Pamela, please.
Thank you, colleagues. And could you please help me with the slides? I'm presenting on behalf of ECLAC, Latin America and the Caribbean region. And we're just highlighting part of our work, which we think might be more interesting and a little different to what every other region is prioritizing. We are generating capacity development and advisory service for the production and use of national transfer accounts called NTAs. We think they provide a coherent accounting framework of economic flows, and we've done that on 13 national workshops. We have 10 national studies. We have a lot of policy recommendations, both at the national level and the regional level. And we think this is very interesting for analyzing the issue of demographic transition, and especially for the possibility of using this data and information for decision-making in public policy. Next, please. We also have this recurrent aging bulletin, which is coming up next week in English and in Spanish, both on aging related activities and events, and also on different publications. And this comes not only from researchers and us, but also from different stakeholders, such as civil society. Next, please. And on this note on civil society, I wanted to stress that our regional conference, Intergovernmental Conference on Older Persons, gathers a wide a range of stakeholders. Just the last edition in December, we were able to have over 100 people in person from civil society, over 600 participants, and in hybrid mode, over 2,000 participants. And a lot of them were from civil society, which is a very salient characteristic of our region. And maybe that is also why we managed to have the binding instrument that has been mentioned, and also why from our region there's a strong call, both from civil society and from many governments, to have a global instrument. And to finish, I just wanted to share with you a monitoring platform that we are developing for the Montevideo Consensus on Population and Development, which is our wider instrument on all of population and development issues. But this has a specific chapter on aging and social protection and the rights of older persons. And it covers indicators, institution, laws and policies, national reports, etc. And we want to offer this both to governments to share experiences and to be able to make follow-up to international and regional commitments easier, as well as to researchers and general public, so that we are have a panorama of what's happening in the region with updated information for everyone to have access to. Next one, I think I'm Yes, that's
Thank you.
it. That's it
Thank
for
you.
us. Thank you very much to everyone. And I give the floor to my colleague from ECE.
Thank you,
Lisa, over to
Pamela.
you.
Thank you very much. So my name is Lisa Wad, and I'm happy to share some of the tools that we have developed in the ECE region. So UNECE stands for countries in Europe, but also North America, Eastern Europe, Caucasus, and Central Asia. And I'd like to start with the Standing Working Group on Aging, which is our intergovernmental body that brings together national focal points on aging from all the member states, but also civil society and researchers and other regional and international organizations active in the field of aging. The group was actually established back in 2008, and we are very happy that in 2020 it was upgraded from a working group on aging to a standing working group on aging by ECOSOC, in recognition of the long-standing importance of population aging to member states in our region. And it convenes annually and develops its own work plan. So, of course, one of the important mandates of the group is the implementation of MIPA and also the monitoring and periodic reviews and appraisal, as we heard earlier from Sarah. But we also co-produce with the members of the group a number of tools that enhance the exchange of experience and peer learning, such as policy briefs, policy seminars, to really exchange on some of the priorities on aging and for older persons in our region. Next slide, please. And one of the sort of knowledge tools or advisory services that we provide is to enhance capacity development on mainstreaming aging. Martin Amberger mentioned earlier that this is increasingly the challenge for the future. Countries also in the Rome Ministerial Declaration last summer put this as one of the key goals of the next 5 years of MIPA implementation, to really mainstream aging across policies. In the past, we had roadmaps for mainstreaming aging developed for countries upon request, really in-depth tailored advice for one country at a time. And a few years ago, the Standing Working Group on Aging then decided that it was time to develop guidelines that would be of benefit to all countries in the region and even beyond. And what you can see on the slide here is the result of that joint work that took 2 years to develop and was issued in 21, the Guidelines for Mainstreaming Aging. And since issuing this document, which provides recommendations on developing national strategic frameworks for mainstreaming aging and provides different steps in how this could be developed at national level, we have now, and please next slide, focused on developing several training activities to bring to life these guidelines and to work with countries to train policymakers at the national level. We did, for example, a training workshop last autumn in the Republic of Moldova and are now about to do another one in Georgia, focusing on specific tools for age-sensitive analysis. So if you want to mainstream aging in a sectoral policy sector, for example, employment or education, the training looks at how to look at data for evidence-based policymaking, assess inequalities, and then think about the reasons for these inequalities and how they can be addressed through policymaking. We also are currently developing an online course on the guidelines that will be available soon, providing a very short interactive introduction to the key principles of mainstreaming aging. And I stop here. Thank you very much.
May I just take the floor?
Yes, Sabine, over to you.
Okay. Good evening. As mentioned earlier, aging is a mega trend in Asia and the Pacific, and it's therefore on the agendas of national governments, stakeholders, and of course, civil society. Next slide, please. In preparation for the fourth review and appraisal, ESCOP therefore received nominations from over 35 government focal points to work with us on the fourth review, and we are still asking member states to come forward to become a focal point. We also had very concrete engagement with CSOs. Dr. Sau already referred to this. There were over 30 CSO groups, but over, really actively engaged in the review process. And in 2020, the UN in Asia Pacific and also international organization in general and some CSOs came together to form this regional networking group that helped us to conduct the regional review, but also now in follow-up works with us to ensure that the implementation of MIPA is accelerated. This group is instrumental. It's part of the Asia Pacific Regional Collaborative Platform. It reports also to ECOSOC, and it's very active on aging. So it's bringing together UN entities, CSOs, and international organizations in general. Next slide, please. We also have undertaken capacity development at the request of member states, in particular on policies, action plans, and monitoring frameworks. There are a number of examples we would be happy to share with you if you're interested. We're also working on NTAs together with DESA and ECLAC, and we have special projects on ICTs and older person and future of work. And so if member states are interested in any support, we stand ready to deliver on this. Next slide, please. Now, coming out of the review and the research we have done, we have developed two dashboards, one on policies and one on data. The policy dashboard shows policies, national policies on aging, action plans, programs that we were able to collect through the surveys, but also through independent research. And this is at the country level, and it's publicly available through our website. In addition to that, we have also identified good practices. So if countries want to learn from each other in terms of how to use ICTs to help older persons, there's a place to go and they can learn from each other. In addition to that, we have a dashboard on data. We show the publicly available data on the situation of older persons. It's up to date. It's for all countries in the region and the sub-regions, and it's demographic data, but it's also data on the economic and social situation of older persons. Next slide, please. In addition to that, we have also developed some e-learning, so people can take a course on MIPA and aging and how it affects policies. At the end of the course, you are awarded a certificate. In addition to that, we have developed a number of videos on different aspects of aging, MIPA, etc. They're all available through our website. And so we're really trying to deliver on our mandates in terms of to promote networking, sharing of experiences, and we stand ready to support you if you have any specific requests. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all the regional commissions, and thank you for sharing those tools. I know it took a little longer, but because of technology, but also because it's important to show you the array. So maybe we'll take on board some of the suggestions made, but we do have some questions that have come on the chat for all four of our panelists. They cover, there are questions. One, there's a question on the importance of lifelong education of older persons. And I would like to distribute it. There are questions about how do you address the digital divide and ensure the technology is used for the benefit of older persons. Then there's a question about the fact that no matter about what happens in MIPA, the human rights approach is very important because we have been talking about extended healthcare, social protection, not going very far. Perhaps the human rights instrument or human rights-based approach is going to be very essential. And last but not least, how do we use the community in delivering care to older persons? Maybe I'll address one question to each. Dr. Hussain, start with whatever, if you want to answer any specific part, just if you have 2 minutes to address any one of these questions, please.
Yeah, I will look at the lifelong learning and the digital divide because it's such an important issue. And I think it's a very important issue to think about the whole life course. And not only so there are some initiatives in the region where there is like digital literacy courses for older people. I would encourage thinking about more innovative approaches and thinking about how we can bring generations together, because that way we can break isolation and we can learn from each other. There's some lessons from Italy, from ECA countries, but particularly South Europe. So Italy has they fund these community groups where older people come, younger people come after school, and then older people help the younger people from different families to finish their homework, and the younger people help the older person with their technology problems. So they do like tech shooting, and they teach them how to use a smartphone or how to get into apps, etc. So we need to think about innovative ways of this, because we can break the isolation and also bring people to technology, which has become so much important during COVID. And a lot of people got completely excluded if they weren't able to use these tools. So I'll move on to give space for other people.
Thank you very much. I think for stressing on, and obviously lifelong education and technology are interlinked. I mean, you need to use both. And thank you for highlighting that. Dr. Sal, I know that you work a lot on the role of community in delivering care for older persons. So I'll come to you with that question, please. Dr. Sal, I know you have done a lot in it, so your contribution on that, please.
Thank you. Yes, I think the community response to aging is one of the most exciting responses. We do work very much for the community, and across Asia Pacific, many countries have really started to facilitate, CSO facilitate older people coming together. Older people with time tend to be more socially isolated and lonely. And I think one of the key things is actually be able to create a platform where they can come together. And we see a phenomenon where it's like seniors coming together. So there's like 5 seniors, 4 seniors for the community, because older people are like, they've been solving problems their whole life. So when they come together, the platform, they identify issues that they have, as well as issues the community they can do something for. In Vietnam, the community-based older people association becomes so successful. There must be become a national initiative. There must be over 2,000 of them across, and I know all across Asia Pacific has been doing that. I think generally speaking, older people, most older people are actually healthy and active, and they provide a lot of caregiving in the community for the family, but also for those who are not in the family. And when they come together, they've been able to solve problems. As some of my experience show that when they come together, they create encouragement for each other. They identify problems in the community. They also start to act on them because they have a platform where they can work together and find solutions. And where they cannot find a solution they can implement, they will actually advocate for effectively. Different countries have different scenarios for that. I think some of them simply older people don't even know what benefits they're entitled to. Many older people are, even in Singapore, are not very literate, and they need to come together and can help each other. So there are many forms of these community-based older people association. As a matter of fact, the alliance that I mentioned before, which is this alliance of CSO agencies working on behalf of older people, being to document the various models and see and the factors that make it work and not work. So I think community energy is very effective. In the end of the day, I don't think we can ever pay for everything that older people need, no matter how wealthy the country is. And it's also beyond, it's not really true to the spirit of a community to not really give a space for community to come together and work. And it's not just older people doing things by themselves. And Dr. Hossain said, also create opportunity for them, engage the youth and others. And in particular, I want to give a shout out to women. I think, of course, we all live longer, and women have the privilege of living even longer than men, but they often live the last 5-10 years of more disability and health issues. And many of them kind of suffer the aggregate disadvantage, shall we say, of the whole lifetime. If anything, just less ability to earn income. They work in caregiving and others, but they don't have an income. And as they grow older, the family, particularly for current cohorts, are sort of falling through the crack, because previously their old age security with the children and the family, and that's not really happening. So I just want to give a shout out, and that community-based actions that engage older women are really effective because we create a platform that can help each other, in addition to have a stronger voice to ask what they need. So I'll just stop there. But I think everybody should be doing this.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I agree. And the fact that, look, government cannot be paying, I mean, everything can't be paid for. There's a role for, of course, the role for the state and all of us as a community too. Dr. Veronica, my question to you, you are in Latin America, you're doing the Inter-American legal instrument on older persons. I mean, what is the main change that has to be made in terms of its effective implementation? I know it's being implemented to different states quite okay, but like question has been asked, how do we move to a stronger human rights-based intervention? What's the basis practically? How do we do that? Just
Okay,
for 2 minutes.
I think we need to work together in the coordination forum, because we need to work as isolated. The academy, the public policy, the social society, the communities, and the different other groups. We need to work together. We need to visibilize this force, and we need to make reinforce the consensus of human rights, and what is the imply in public policy, what imply in the life. And another very important thing is to work with the communities, because the communities have to replicate the good practice, and that is very, very important. And another thing is to work with the different generations, because the young people have right to know how is the aging process, because they reinforce in the future different challenge. And we need to community. We work with different generations, with the state, with the civil society, and with the people not organized, with the families, because the families transformation in the second transition, demographic transitions. I need to work and see the communities and the other and different institutions. Yes. Because it's not only the health, it's not only the social development, it's economy, it's everything. We need to transversalization, work in the transversalization form.
Right. Thank you so much. I think human rights is just not the job of just one institution or one sector, and it needs to cross-cut. Thank you so much for highlighting that and about the need for everyone to work together. Mr. Amberger, from your experience at country level, as well as within UNECE, in countries where the mainstreaming works better than others, what really works there? What needs to be in place? Very briefly, what do you think? I mean, is political commitment the key? What's the key tipping point? I mean, what causes the tipping point? I mean.
Well, it's a difficult question because all the countries are so diverse also in the way they are organized, and many of we have lots of countries in the ECE region who have national development strategies regarding mainstreaming aging. We have many countries who have set up a national coordinator or coordination mechanism or body for mainstreaming aging. For instance, in the Czech Republic, we have regional coordinators also for each region. Or in Ireland, we have an age-friendly alliance that was established in each local area. So this is something. This is really important to have the different levels involved and to have different actors involved, to have civil society, to have the older persons themselves involved, and also the people working in the ministries, in the different administrations, and also science, to have data and to make use of the data, because this is something we tend to forget. We need evidence-based policies, and to have evidence-based policies, we need enough data, and that's something we've heard from other speakers as well. So I think it's not just one solution, and we of course we need people who are convinced that this is the right thing, and that we need to progress that way, and we are on the right path.
I think the point that you made about really empowered national coordination mechanisms, it came out in the CSOC when the discussions happened, that countries that have that seem to be making that extra push. So very good point. I'm going to, it's great to listen to the experts. So I don't think I will be making a very long closing statement. So there's one more question for Dr. Shireen that was asked, and I want to address anyone, many. Do you think, and this is a question that all the experts can reflect on, but it's for you, Dr. Hussain, is the question that sometimes, and I see this in developing countries, that the family, the moment you look at the family being the invisible welfare agency, does the state then abdicate some of its responsibilities in that case? And how do you balance that? I know it's not a very easy question to answer, balancing family responsibilities and state responsibilities, but can you give a succinct answer?
Yeah, thank you. I was trying actually to type quickly the answer. So it is a complex matter, as you say, and I think it's really important to recognize that the family is very important, and also the bi-direction kind of caring and funding. So actually older people also are a source of care and a source of finance and housing. And the issue is that we need to bring the voices into the policy sphere. So it's easy for the policymakers to say the family is so important. And actually it's not just an Western Asian issue. In Germany, when you go to do the long-term care insurance, if you have children, you pay less premium, because the state or the insurance assume that they will have informal support from families. So I think it's really important to bring this issue upfront to the policymakers and to bring the stakeholders. And I think without bringing the voices of older people themselves and the informal carers into the table, you're not going to achieve that. So it's easy for people who are making decisions unconsciously to make these assumptions, to say the family likes it, the older person likes it, why would we interfere? But without also data bringing in the issue that actually the family sometimes in between a rock and a hard place. They want to go out for work, they're migrating, and they want to care for their families, but there is no strong market. So you need to shape the market. You need to have some responsibilities. And the dialogue started to happen. I'm looking at Dr. Tsao and the role of civil society to bring and to bridge this and to bring older people's voices and informal carers' voices into the equation. And paramount among them is women, both the caregivers and most of the care teams.
Thank you. I mean, I wish we could go on and on and on. I believe that I do not know. I've enjoyed moderating this wonderful discussion. I don't know. I'm sure people who are there, and I can see a very large number of people online who have stayed despite the different time zones. I think we've addressed an extremely important issue. The structure of society, the nature of society is going to change by 2050. And we need to see this as a positive. We need to see this as an achievement. I think I'm tired of people describing this as a burden, as a disaster. It's an achievement that we planned for. We need to manage it. And I think what we heard from all the four panelists, I'm very grateful to all four of you for really bringing your perspective, for being so wonderful in your answers. And it kind of resonates with all of us who are advocates for older persons, but it's a great learning experience. And I hope that this is a network that we build. This is a union that we keep up. And I'd like to thank all my co-organizers, including all my colleagues from the regional commissions for really setting up this conversation. And I really ask for a virtual clap for all our panelists for their wonderful contributions. Thank you for joining us. And I hope that the future will be really bright for older persons in all regions. Thank you very much to all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.